Gaywyck by Vincent Verga. Publisher Allison Books, Los Angeles, New York. Narrator Eric Aust. 6 days before Danough arrived, the windows were unsealed. The spring air charged through the house, filling the rooms with a palpable cheer. We four sat down to dinner in good spirits. Denver's complimented Keys on a shorter hairstyle and did not go shades of puce when Jones proudly claimed the credit for it. 5 days before he arrived, I finished the card catalog for Librarian. I took a long walk to the farm after burying a dead rabbit that Cale had killed and left on the hearth. When I walked by the waterfall, I was amazed to see Jones splashing in the pool. To my touch, the water was freezing, but had it been bath warm, I would have refused his invitation. I could not have undressed before him. He made me feel self-conscious and embarrassed by my body. Recently, he had joined me in the gymnasium. There were never any conflicts, but the clean, heated smell of him made me uncomfortable. I read Stoddard's South Sea Idols and concluded there was more to love than chumming. I dreamed that Osric bit the small finger off my left hand. I awoke inordinately distressed and read Dowden for 3 hours. 4 days before he arrived, the tulips opened. My friend claimed she heard them part their petals. Their brilliant colors burned the retina like sunspots. I walked briskly with Cale for 2 hours along the shore, humming the new Chopin ballade in G minor, opus 23, that Keys had selected for me that morning. The first 30 measures seemed deceptively simple. Then the form became clear and the staggering demands apparent. The coda taxed me and made me resent my small hands yet again. But Keys was especially pleased with me. He literally dragged me back to the music room after lunch to work on the piece until past 3. "Why, Robbie, dear, don't I love you?" said Keys quite suddenly. "You are nearly too beautiful, and you are quite gifted. Why don't I love you instead of him?" I sighed eloquently. "He is a Welsh mongrel, Robbie. He hasn't a glimmer of intelligence under all that cunning, and he will never make music." "Does it matter?" "It most certainly ought to matter, but no, of course it doesn't matter. You see how wise you are. Why don't I love you?" I turned and looked upward at the Botticelli Madonna. She had green eyes. "Denver's adores him too, Robbie." "Not that that confirms or denies anything. My Welsh rabbit swears he will have only me. He swears Denver's hounds him. He swears. Not that I believe him, of course. Jones is my Atlas. He holds up the globe of my life. I want everyone to be happy. You can take him away now if you must, as long as I can have my sweetness." "I take him away," I thought, recalling my first meeting with Keys. "He was afraid I planned to remove Danough from his life. Why should he think that?" "Amo amas amat," he sighed melodramatically. "Who would have suspected me capable of such a love?" I turned back to the keyboard and began at the beginning. I could not imagine why Keys had taken me into his confidence. The binding power of music? I suddenly felt implicated in some way, involved. To change the subject, I purposely devalued several notes, which instantly shifted his attention to where I wished it. Before dismissing me, he played through the ballad once, then without a hesitation plunged unannounced into Liszt's sonata in B minor. He played the swelling melodies and impossible beauty as a passionate, lucid afterthought to our conversation, pounding his irrational joy into its shape and design. Afterward, I sat in silence, putting my arm around his shoulders. I hugged him to me and kissed him on his tear-stained cheek. I hurried down the central staircase. The strains of the Liszt sonata, Keys' ringing tones in its Catalina, chased me. Through the oval window, the sunlight waved a path on the surface of the sea. I wanted to leap upon it and dance a crazed jig to its end beyond the horizon. I felt Danough's presence in its golden warmth. I remembered having kissed him for the first time on that landing. 3 days before he arrived, the leafless cornelian cherry trees flowered yellow. A young man unwrapped the rose trees outside the open windows while I sat at my desk, reading a letter from him. If my father taught me aggressiveness and competitiveness, you are right to perceive he also taught me courage and independence. I do not know where the error lies. I do not pretend to set people right, but I do see that they are often wrong. I walked to the farm to watch the plowing and inhale the fragrance of the furrowed earth. On the way back, I left the beach to check Tristan and Isolde, the swans, on the pond. Their mating ritual had been continuous since mid-January, and I was eager to view the cygnets. 1 year, Brian told me, there were 7. On top of the compost heap behind the cottage, I saw a dead gull. From a distance, the creature appeared to be a small eruption of bubbling water. So great was the activity on its corpse. I stood mesmerized, aghast, appalled by the sight. Countless white maggots undulated, uncasing, enveloping, ingesting. Within he fed without, be rich no more, I quoted, attempting but failing to distance myself. For an instant, I pictured my corpse, teeming with similar creatures. Good Lord, I moaned, stepping away, repulsed and shaken by the violent mound. It appeared a misshapen, pulsating chrysanthemum. 2 days before he arrived, the shade bush blossomed white. I strolled across the warm meadow beyond the budding jam pot to get a closer look at the trees. I discovered a patch of scarlet columbines. As a child, I had always considered them the most bizarre flower. I remembered the stairwell of Gramercy Park and made a mental note to ask Danough why he had chosen them. A large colony of maroon wake robin drew me further. I sat on a stone stile, admiring the mahogany red flower and absorbing the heat of the sun when someone called my name. Jones, disheveled, balancing atop the crumbly wall, was walking toward me. He wore only trousers rolled up to his knees and carried in his right hand his shoes, stockings, and shirt. His hair was wet. He had curling tendrils of red, violet, wild flowers entwined in it, around his neck and dangling from his left hand. Guess what I've been up to? He shouted gleefully. Don't tell me. I've just finished eating. He laughed so loudly and so long at my weak joke that I had to smile. You've been swimming in the ocean. How'd you know? You've been spying? No, your head's wet. You're draped in beach pea, which grows in the sand at the end of this pile. You're coming from the water, and now that I see you up close, your eyes are red. An educated guess, Jones. A robin flew overhead. Forgetting Jones completely, I watched it disappear into the woods. You really think you're smart, Whyte? You think I'm stupid? I looked at him and rose to go. He was annoyingly repetitive, obsessive. He stood, dividing his attention between me and untangling his gold chain with its pendant dragon that had knotted in his pocket. I wondered which of the 2 old fools had given it to him. At one time, I had contemplated stealing it, but had refused to stoop to his level. He leaped from the wall, blocking my way, slipping the chain around his neck and centering the gold dragon on his breastplate. He giggled, stalling for time. He wasn't very good at playing confrontation scenes. He lacked a strategy. His aptitude for the practical precluded cogitation. I know a lot you'd never guess. A lot nobody would. He looked like a rat tangled in weeds. Good for you, Jones. I moved around him. He caught my arm. I braced myself. This was his moment to throw down the gauntlet. I wrenched myself free of him and forced an insouciant smile. Your gossip, Jones, ain't worth the time of day. Maybe not. But the story of how Cormac killed his father and then himself is... I blanched. He grinned. I strained for bravura. You're Worse than stupid, Jones. I think you're insane. You ought to know, friend. You're an expert on that subject, ain't you? I wanted to smash him in the face, but I didn't. To my credit, I turned and walked away, leaving him alone to tample the wake robin. I tried to put the scene out of my head. I knew Danough had nothing to do with any of it. Cormac was dead. More than that, I need not know. Brian, crossing the meadow, caught my attention. He was carrying a basket. I ran toward him. What are you looking for? Morals. Want to help? I live in terror mushrooms. My mother was an anthologist of stories about people mistaking deathcap for an edible field mushroom or the common puffball and perishing quicker than by spontaneous combustion. Their heads fell into the stew, was her favorite tagline. We ate mushrooms cultivated by local farmers, and even those she cooked with a penny in the pan and onions to make doubly sure. Neither ever turned black, but she persisted in warning us that the fleshy fungus was brother to the mold and sister to the slimes. She served them only because my father insisted. I still bore the psychic scars. They grow near Mayflowers, Brian said. I know, he laughed. Everyone at Gaywyck knew of my fear. Whenever the mushroom was served, a joke would be made in a reference to place of origin. The farm meadow, the lower garden, Brian's crop, etc. An evening of the previous fall, after eating one he could not name, Denvers slid off his chair, crashing to the floor. And then, when Ambrose and Keyes shouted with glee, Denvers rose, bowed, and explained he had dropped his head into the stew because of the wash and curl he'd given his hair that very afternoon. Do you want to help? Brian repeated. I'm making mushroom cookies for Mortimer. I make them for him every Easter. He loves them. I was certain I had misunderstood him. Butter, brown sugar, eggs, vanilla, almond extract, chocolate, flour, baking soda, salt, sour cream, amaretti crumbs, and mushrooms. I don't believe it. So no. We gathered morals. I had to admit that nothing looks like a moral but another moral, which gave me some peace. It was fun rooting among the Mayflowers. Since my arrival at Gaywyck, I had indulged my inhibited taste for the mushrooms' strong earth-like flavor. I was curious to sample the cookies before Jones' mushrooms had been a common sight at our table. Brian, how did Cormac die? In a fire, same with his father. They died together. Revisionist history, I wondered. How did the fire start? Oh, everyone says it was a kerosene lamp. Mr. Gaylord was drunk. He knocked it over in his bedroom. What was Cormac doing in his bedroom? He ran in to save him, I think. Why? Have you been talking to Jones again? He's such a pig. I wonder if Piggy is any good at finding truffles. We laughed. The sun had grown hotter. I was perspiring heavily from stooping and traipsing among the Mayflowers. Jones has been swimming, I said, weighing the possibility. I went this morning. Did you? I tried 2 days ago after racing on the beach, but the water was too cold. It wasn't too cold this morning. Let's go swimming. We've got enough morals to open a bakery. He hesitated, flustered. If he refused, I was not going to pursue it. If he did not feel able to let me see. Yes, he said. All right. Good. I shouted, excited by his trust. I ran in the direction of the jetty, unbuttoning my heavy cotton shirt. He followed at a slower pace, frowning at the rocks. I stripped quickly, set, and immersed my feet. The water was freezing. The water is freezing, Brian! It warms up once you're in it. I grunted, unconvinced. Standing to lean over, I wondered about my heart's condition. See, he snorted as he shoved me into the sea. I howled, flailing and sinking with a gurgle. When I surfaced, he was beside me. You could die from that, I sputtered. He mimicked. The water was icy, only just bearable. If we danced briskly and splashed energetically, which we did, to each other's great amusement. He spotted the high dorsal fins about 100 yards offshore. I had just butted away when he calmly directed my bleary-eyed gaze. I howled again and shrieked, "Sharks! Springing toward the shore?" "A gang of whales," he corrected, as the three awesome 20-foot mammals, with their white chins and white eye patches, turned and rolled, displaying white bellies. One broke free and did 4 backflips. Brian applauded. They were frolicking, he explained. I was not smiling. I'd read that those killer whales shared much with their cousins, the porpoise, but that did not include a pleasant disposition. I raced to the jetty, demanding Brian follow. Clambering to the front, I watched the 3 traveling companions shoot up out of the water and gracefully bound one over the other, performing, it seemed, for us. I thought of Jonah. It suddenly seemed feasible they were bigger than my bedroom. One paused mid-turn and got an eye lock on me. A feeling of direct communication tingled down my spine. I knew there was no danger. Spring was theirs as well as mine. They turned several more complete flips, then submerged and disappeared. I sensed Brian behind me. Glancing over my shoulder, I saw him standing, watching for the fins to reappear. In his excitement, he hadn't covered himself. I saw his wound. To my tremendous relief, he had not been destroyed. He caught my glance. "What's the matter?" he asked defensively. "Jones told me you had nothing left." "Almost." "That isn't true." "It's ugly," he whispered, turning away. "You could never be ugly, Brian. Jones is ugly." I thought of the 13 headless bees. "Does it..." I almost asked if it worked, as if I were discussing a fountain pen. He sat down, facing the opposite direction from me. I felt he wanted to talk to me about it, but even if he couldn't look me in the eyes, I listened hard. "Yes," he answered. He confessed he didn't know from personal experience, but all the famous doctors had promised it would function efficiently, though the damage had been extensive and irrevocable. No one but Danough Gaylord had ever seen him unclothed. He doesn't think I'm ugly either. He never lies. I know. Which is more than we can say for Jones. The day before Danough's arrival, it turned cold. I was worried for the hundreds of daffodils that carpeted the edge of the rise around the yew trees, but my secret friend assured me they and her multicolored tulips would look newly minted. I collected a large bouquet of wild flowers for Danough's study. Dandelions, forget-me-nots, iris, spiderwort, and blue violets. I wondered if he knew the old lore and could read the message of the flowers. I thought of writing it out, but rejecting the notion as vulgar and overstated. Engrossed in arranging the flowers, I only knew Jones was behind me from our reflections in the glass, shielding the Manet. "You are so talented, Robbie boy. You and Stephen would have hit it off very good." I did not look at him. I groaned loudly and theatrically. "You are so tiresome, Jones." "It's a curious talent, being as tiresome as you. It's kind of miracle, really." "I know who Stephen was, Jones." "How do you know?" "It's all in Danough's diary. I read it in Danough's diary. Did you miss that part in my journal?" He looked stunned. It was my turn to laugh. He shrugged and walked from the room, leaving his nasty aura behind. I walked around Danough's desk and opened the window. The sunset was in triumphant progress. The hovering clouds sat motionless in a sky that shifted from bright blue into green. The sea was burnished copper. The air soft with silent expectation. The stillness, this spectral moment, brother to the dawn, was mine. I felt blessed and alive with grace. They arrived. Suddenly, Mortimer was hugging me, and Goodbody was telling me how robust I looked. Suddenly, Danough was handing Ambrose their coats, and I was grinning at the glorious sight of him. We shook hands like old friends and walked into dinner side by side. He said I was larger than he remembered me. I thought his eyes seemed paler gray. When he laughed, I was made restless by the beauty of the sound. He touched my shoulder. Short black hairs grew above the knuckles on each of his fingers. During dinner, we often exchanged glances across the table. When he said the carrots were splendid, I took a second helping. When he asked for local news, I nearly said nothing had happened since I left him in Gramercy Park, but Denvers began discussing the farm. Danough's eyes told me he understood what I was thinking. I told about the whales. I wondered if his neck had always been so sturdy. I wanted to stretch across the fondle and deep black curls that twisted behind his ears. When he laughed at something Goodbody said, I laughed as well. Though I hadn't heard a word, I trusted his judgment. As he listened to Keyes tell a story, he lifted his right hand to his forehead and brushed back his tousled hair. For gestures like that, I thought, one falls hopelessly in love for a lifetime. I looked around the table. Goodbody loved Mortimer. Keyes and Denvers loved Jones. I loved Danough. Love held us all. Love bound us together. Everyone looked happy and good. My secret friend was right. Nothing evil will ever happen to us, I thought. Too many of us are motivated by love. Love changes. Love inspires. Love heals. Jones said something that upset Danough. I hadn't been listening to the conversation, but I felt the pail descend when I attempted to assemble the pieces. It was too late. Jones was gone. Danough was outraged. Denvers was embarrassed. Keyes was offering excuses. Mortimer and Goodbody were noticeably silent. I returned to their midst. What happened? I asked. Danough looked at me with a stunned expression on his face, and he laughed. I grinned stupidly and said something about being preoccupied with private thoughts. Mortimer said he knew that country well. Keyes started to relate the events to me. Denvers interrupted, saying it wasn't worth the effort, but apologies were certainly in order. I offered my apologies. Everyone laughed. There was no singing that night. Danough excused himself from the table. Mortimer and Goodbody followed, retiring to their rooms. I dallied with the notion of asking Denvers or Keyes what Jones had said, but decided it would be stirring the pot. As my mother used to say, I went to my rooms, intending to bathe and read more Carlyle. I must confess, for the first time, I was actually pleased to find Jones sprawled on my sofa. What took you so long? What do you mean? I asked, removing my jacket. Everyone shot off soon after I did. I was out of my head down there, Robbie. You're right. I'm an idiot. I stared at him. Though he looked quite acceptable in his new dinner suit, the tone of his voice bade me beware. I put my jacket back on and sat in a chair beyond his reach. I don't know what you said down there. I wasn't listening. He gave me a squinting, unconvinced glance. I felt threatened. I wasn't. I was thinking about Cormac's death. I know how Cormac died. Nobody knows how Cormac died but me and Keyes. I shrugged. Denvers knows everything, I thought. Keyes is a proud fool. There was a long pause. I wondered how I could get him to tell me what he had said at the table. I thought you were just being polite. Polite about what? I asked, thinking I'd missed something again. About what I said. No, I really didn't hear you. That's good. It was stupid. I'm sorry I said it. You should apologize. I know. I ain't gonna, but when I ask to talk to him tomorrow, he'll think that's what I want. Won't he be surprised? Good night, Jones. He raised his eyebrows. I stood up. A bit early for bed, ain't it? Or should I say early for sleep? What do you want, Jones? I asked, sitting still, hopeful the conversation could be turned backward. I came to say goodbye. I looked dumbfounded. He laughed, delighted with himself. You heard me right. Where are you going? That's my secret. Why are you leaving? Because my plan's all set. Everything's ready. I need to see Gaylord, and then I'm off. Fucking goddamn. You think it was easy with those two? I'm only sorry you and me never became friends. That's still time. You know, I ain't going till tomorrow. There'll never be time enough for that, Jones. You're lost, Bob Whyte. Bob Whyte? Bob Whyte. He repeated my name loudly, expertly mimicking the song of the bird. I laughed, amused. He smiled. Don't it annoy you? No, you do it well. I do everything well, Robbie boy. He laughed charmingly. I felt compelled to believe him, but not to tell him so. I never took your watch, you know. Good night, Jones. Good night, Bob White. He stretched to his full length and stood. He crossed toward me. To my credit, I did not flinch. I have a long day tomorrow, Bob. I need my sleep, too. Before I realized his intent, he swooped down and kissed me wetly on the mouth. You're such a pretty lad, Bob White. If I was even half as pretty as you, but... What the fuck? I'm doing real good just as I am. Good night, Jones. Goodbye, Robbie boy. He closed the door quickly and quietly behind him. I was overwhelmed by a presentiment of doom. I wanted to warn Danough, but had nothing tangible to offer besides palpitations. I decided to leave the entire situation in his capable hands. I decided to take a hot bath. While the tub filled, I imagined what Jones could have said at dinner. Seeking distraction, I looked out the window. A star fell. I wondered if Danough had seen it. Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold. To offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides. And in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.